In the summer of 2026, North America will absorb a massive, concentrated expenditure shock. The FIFA World Cup is arriving, bringing a surge of international capital, localized spending, and complex financial modeling. Here is the headline forecast: a projected $80.1 billion in gross output and $40.9 billion in GDP. This capital supports an estimated 824,000 full-time jobs. These downstream effects trace back to a $13.9 billion expenditure by FIFA, host cities, and tourists. To arrive at these numbers, economists rely on a tool called an inter-country social accounting matrix. It maps how a single dollar spent at a stadium ripples through 45 different productive sectors across 76 countries. This complex modeling is required because the 2026 tournament is the largest in history. For the first time, the competition is expanding from 32 to 48 national teams, drastically increasing the volume of matches, fans, and logistics.
However, these gross projections represent a theoretical economic ceiling. They measure the total volume of money moving through the system, but they do not guarantee that wealth actually stays in the host communities. To understand the true economics of 2026, we must look at the historical reality of hosting mega events, a record of massive, unrecouped capital expenditures. Host nations routinely fall into the white elephant trap. In Brazil 2014 and Qatar 2022, billions of public dollars were spent constructing sprawling, single-use stadiums that lacked a post-tournament population base to sustain them. The 2026 tournament breaks from this pattern. Instead of demanding new construction, the operational model relies entirely on a network of pre-existing, commercially active venues. The logistical footprint is distributed across 16 different cities, spanning the United States, Canada, and Mexico. By utilizing established NFL and MLS stadiums already embedded in profitable sports ecosystems, the initial fiscal risk profile for host nations drops significantly. This has led to a widespread policy assumption. If a city avoids building a billion-dollar stadium from scratch, hosting the matches becomes an automatic net positive for the local economy. While capital risk is certainly lower than in previous decades, relying on gross macroeconomic projections masks a deeper structural asymmetry. We need to examine who actually captures the wealth being generated. This flowchart shows how the social accounting matrix achieves its $40.9 billion GDP projection. It relies on the logic of economic multipliers, tracking how a dollar spent on a hotel room becomes income for hotel staff, who then spend it on groceries and real estate. The model registers every cascading transaction. Crucially, it assumes all event-related spending represents entirely new economic activity that would not have occurred without the tournament. Academic economists frequently point out a flaw in this methodology. Standard econometric models often overstate benefits by confusing gross spending with net spending. They ignore the substitution effect. When hundreds of thousands of football fans arrive, regular tourists and business travelers avoid the host cities to bypass the crowds, canceling out a portion of the anticipated gains. Then there is the crowding out effect. Local residents alter their normal consumption habits, staying home to avoid gridlock and inflated premium pricing at local businesses. Historical data supports this critique. The 1994 U.S. World Cup produced economic benefits several billion dollars short of initial projections. Furthermore, these multipliers fail to track income leakage. A massive portion of the money spent locally is immediately extracted by international corporate entities. Gross multipliers create a policy illusion. Failing to subtract the everyday economic activity that the mega event displaces presents an overly optimistic picture of local prosperity. To understand income leakage, we have to look directly at the most valuable revenue streams generated by the tournament. The highest yield capital doesn't come from hot dog sales or transit passes. It comes from global broadcasting rights, international corporate sponsorships, and premium merchandise licensing. These scalable revenue streams bypass the host cities entirely. They are captured and controlled by FIFA's centralized, Swiss-based corporate structure. For the 2023 to 2026 cycle, FIFA projects total revenues approaching $13 billion. Virtually none of that corporate revenue accrues to the GDP of the host municipalities. The host cities are left competing for local tourism spending, which represents a much smaller, less scalable fraction of the event's total economic footprint.
This dynamic creates a negative net current account flow. Income is transferred out of the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and into Swiss accounts. To put the local retention in perspective, the total projected tourism footprint for the entire North American continent is $8 billion. That is roughly 4 times the revenue of Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, spread across 3 countries and 16 cities. The financial architecture of the tournament is designed to siphon the most lucrative capital out of the host economies, leaving local governments to manage the lower-yield tourism. While the most scalable revenues leave the host cities, the most durable costs remain heavily concentrated on local municipalities. Host cities must absorb severe, unrecoverable operational expenses. Security deployments alone require massive public funding, including $625 million in federal FEMA security grants distributed across the U.S. host cities. Even with pre-existing infrastructure, localized capital investment is required. AT&T Stadium in Dallas underwent a $295 million upgrade to widen the field, replace the turf, and meet FIFA's strict compliance standards. This localized burden stretches across the triangulated from initial estimates in the tens of millions to approximately $380 million. Despite the creation of local impact supplier programs, surveys show 58% of small business owners in host cities expect no positive revenue impact compared to a normal summer. In the hospitality sector, corporate hotels routinely boost profits by charging premium surge rates, while the hourly wages for the workers staffing the event typically remain unchanged. Because many of those hotels are owned by international chains, a significant portion of that inflated room rate leaks out of the local economy entirely. Ultimately, the final result is a massive structural asymmetry. The mega event model operates as a mechanism where international organizations privatize the financial gains, while local taxpayers socialize the operational risk. The tournament generates measurable growth, though its effects are highly concentrated in specific sectors and regions. Early consumer spending data from Bank of America tracks a verifiable 16.7% spike in non-local visitor spending across host cities during the initial weeks of the event. This chart displays the verified macroeconomic modeling for annualized GDP boosts. The United States sees a 0.4% bump, Canada registers 0.8%, and Mexico experiences a 1.2% increase. Mexico benefits the most proportionally because its economy has a higher relative exposure to tourism and services, making the influx of international spending much more visible against its baseline GDP. In absolute terms, Mexico's economic benefit is estimated at roughly $3 billion. However, realizing these gains depends heavily on actual attendance, which faces constraints from high ticket prices and visa restrictions that limit travel from lower-income qualifying nations. The economic boost is real, but it operates on a tighter scale and with a vastly different geographic distribution than the official $40.9 billion headline suggests. If the raw economic output is moderated, the true value of hosting lies in legacy investments, infrastructure that serves the general population long after the tournament ends. Unlike the wasteful stadium builds of the past, 2026 is driving genuine public goods. Dallas, for example, is accelerating a $150 million multi-use trail and expanding its regional transit network, assets that permanently benefit local residents. Cities also bank on a validation effect, using their status as host cities to signal infrastructure readiness to corporate decision-makers looking to relocate headquarters. Structurally, the 2026 model is a significant improvement. By eliminating the necessity of single-use stadiums, it is a fiscally responsible evolution of the World Cup format. But the absence of white elephants does not mean the structural asymmetry has been resolved. Host taxpayers still underwrite the security, transit, and operational risks, serving as the financial backstop for international corporate yield. The 2026 World Cup is undoubtedly a better model, but honest economic analysis requires looking past the $40 billion gross projection to calculate the arithmetic of the public subsidy required to achieve it.